Get some analysis on the conversation we just had with ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa. Joining us is political analyst Dr Ongama Mtimka. Good to have you, Doc, and thank you very much for your time. President saying, I suppose, in a number of times in that interview, we had many instances of dropping the ball, or we had various steps and missteps. Let's start with the latest decision of the suspension of President Zuma using one of the provisions of the Constitution. Is that going to count as one of the many instances of dropping the ball and various missteps in dealing with former President Jacob Zuma?
Good evening to you and your viewers, Thabo. Thank you for having me here. So the ANC was in a quagmire here in the sense that it wanted to have a response to the former president's gambit, but at the same time it was quite aware that 95% of what organizations or individuals experience derives more from their responses than the event itself, which accounts for 5%, as one adage goes. So it needed to process the moves by former President Jacob Zuma. And I think that it's culminated in a position where it's taken what I would describe as an optimal way forward, in the sense that it is responding to those that were criticizing it for non-action by this summary suspension, while at the same time, it's not taking the kind of action that would galvanize former President Jacob Zuma's supporters that may be sitting on the fence within the party, who would have felt that an unprocedural approach, which could result in a dismissal, would be something that makes them to want to fight, as opposed to this approach that says, for now, we are taking a summary suspension, and we're going to consider this matter, but we're going to do it after election. I think it's a inwardly focused decision of the party that responds to some sensitivities, while at the same time not digging a grave as far as how it handles a situation that affects former President Jacob Zuma, to which there's an idealistic position that says they should have immediately, expelled him. And while that is gratifying as far as, showing leadership and decisiveness, I don't think that it would be wise, especially at a time when they don't know how many that remain within the party are in fact waiting for a galvanizing event like that. Remember, Thabo, sorry not to belabor this point, you remember that it was not the loss of the Polokwane conference per se that galvanized people to start COPE, but the ultimate recalling incidents that then made people who were contemplating something to act with a lot more vigor.
Is it, though, not a mischaracterization of what is happening here for President Cyril Ramaphosa to say, oh, well, there are 350 parties who are going to be contesting this election. MK is just another new addition. MK is not really a new addition, is it? And for him to just want to discount JZ history and saying, well, we will not be deterred by histories of certain individuals.
Well, if you look at the history of loss of support for the ANC in the democratic, throughout history, it's always resulted from splinter parties, whether it was the PAC during the liberation struggle or initially the UDM in the democratic period, and COPE and economic freedom fighters, and you count them. So splinter formations have the kind of effect on the ANC which cannot be ignored. For that reason, that's why they've acted with a lot more caution against former President Jacob Zuma.
Back to your point.
It is mischaracterization, to borrow from a word.
Back to your point to say they don't know how many are still there who are on the fence. One would say, looking at now the inconsistency in how they are applying their step-aside rule, maybe they do know. Characters like Batabile Dlamini, characters like Zandile Gumede, they know they are there, and they are seemingly wanting to bring them back into the fold, and the president trying to explain why we are seeing them again.
Absolutely. But also there's the rank and file membership, which could be galvanized by an action which they may see as too harsh. Remember, former President Jacob Zuma's heart is not in the ANC, but the gambit that he's playing was that instead of me announcing my departure, I'm going to challenge you to fire me. There's a reason why he did that, because he understands that if he is expelled by the ANC, there's more to gain politically for him than him leaving the ANC.
Well,
which he has effectively done, by the way. He's already left, except that the machinations of the process he could come back and play the victim card. I mean, this is his politics. He does this all the time, where he triggers a response, you respond, and then it becomes your response to his stimulus. And as a result of that, it builds a whole political campaign around that response. So I think this is what they are trying to deny him of.
Exactly. So are they still opening a door there for him to continue to prolong this process? In their letter, they're saying, well, only way to remedy this is for you to subject yourself to disciplinary processes or go to the appeals structure and appeal this decision.
I think they've thrown the ball back on his court, in the sense that, one, they know that he's not going to subject himself to those processes, and two, they have said, we are going to look at this matter after the elections. So I think what they've done, and this is where I take this optimal response conceptualization, that they have deferred the matter, but not in a way that they have done since last year. In fact, they were searching for what their approach is going to be. If you listen to interviews done by Secretary General Fikile Mbalula or Chairman Mandashe, they were talking about, for example, what are you going to do with somebody who's already left? Why call them to a disciplinary hearing or whatever process you may want to insist? And that was not the optimal response. The optimal response is one where there is some measured response, while at the same time it's not to the extent that it can galvanize people.
What did you make of his answer when Zianda was pushing him on him making empty promises and not following up? And one of the revelations, I don't know if he's said this anyway in any other platform, but I heard him say today, for me anyway, for the first time, that as the chair of the war room, he wanted to quit that job. He went to President Jacob Zuma and said, this thing was not effective, pull me out of this thing, find somebody else. I don't want to be a part of this anymore.
That's interesting. By the way, I must commend Zianda. She really did well, especially in those moments where we needed him to commit, whether it's the bullet trades, the 2 years since some of the promises were made. So that was interesting when Pratabo, because it gives us a second version in terms of what's happened. If my memory serves me well, the action to complain about the war room, I think had come. I think it was during Brian Malifa's time, if my memory serves me well. So what we had heard before was that it was the chief executive who had actually complained about it, and the closure thereof had happened as a result of the effort of the chief executive. This is a new twist to the story of how the war room was closed.
Yeah, indeed. Let's leave it there. Much appreciated. Thank you for your analysis here tonight. That's Dr. Ongama Mtimka.